Here is something nobody at any press briefing today has answered. Iran's foreign ministry confirmed this morning that Tehran will not be sending negotiators to Pakistan for the second round of talks. The ceasefire expires Wednesday. Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner flew to Islamabad anyway. And China, the country whose oil purchases give Iran the economic oxygen to refuse, whose satellite-guided Iranian strikes on American bases, whose Security Council veto blocked every enforcement mechanism America wanted, issued no statement about Iran's refusal. Not a word about the Tuska, the Iranian cargo ship America seized on Sunday that was heading from China to Iran. Not a call from Wang Yi pressing Iran back to the table. Nothing. I want to spend the next 20 minutes explaining what that silence tells China, because I think China's nothing today is doing more work in this negotiation than anything Washington or Tehran has said out loud. Let me start with Iran's refusal, because the way the coverage is framing it is wrong, and understanding why it is wrong is essential to understanding China's silence. Every outlet is treating Iran's refusal as stubbornness, as bad faith, as a country playing games with a ceasefire clock. The framing is Iran is the problem. If Iran would just get on a plane, a deal could happen. That framing misses what Iran is actually doing. Iran's refusal is a strategic calculation, and the calculation is based on a very specific experience from round one. 21 hours in Islamabad, the highest level direct U.S.-Iran meeting since 1979, Vance and Galibaf across from each other, Pakistani mediators in the room, and when it ended, Galibaf said something I want to give you exactly because the exact words matter. He said, before the negotiations, I emphasized that we have the necessary good faith and will, but due to the discover more TV and video, translation software, shorts, experiences of the two previous wars, we have no trust in the opposing side. He is describing a trust deficit, not a capability gap, not a military calculation, a trust deficit. America signed the JCPOA in 2015 and tore it up in 2018. America announced the ceasefire and then imposed a naval blockade inside the ceasefire window. America's president told reporters Iran had agreed to everything. Iran's foreign ministry went public calling those claims false. Iraqi said Iran was inches from a deal before America shifted the goalposts. One U.S. source told Reuters the two sides were 80% there. So Iran got within 20% of the highest stakes deal in half a century, and then America moved the terms. And then on Sunday, America fired rounds from a 5-in gun into the engine room of an Iranian cargo ship, sent Marines rappelling from helicopters onto its deck, and announced the seizure on social media. The ship was heading from China to Iran. Iraqi called it proof of America's lack of seriousness in diplomacy. Iran's state news agency, IRNA, called the second round a media game, a performance to assign blame, not a genuine attempt at a deal. That is not stubbornness. That is a country that has learned from 2 previous nuclear agreements and 52 days of war exactly how much American words are worth when the cameras are off. There is something else in Iran's refusal that I think the coverage is missing entirely. The Iran you are watching in these news cycles is not one Iran, it is 2. There is the Iran of Arakchi, the foreign minister, the diplomat, the negotiator who flew to Islamabad for 21 hours and called Hormuz open on Friday. That Iran wants to negotiate. It knows the blockade is real. It knows that if the ceasefire collapses Wednesday and bombing resumes, the next phase will be harder to survive than the last. And then there is the Iran of the IRGC, the hardliners who overruled Arakchi within hours of his Hormuz announcement on Friday, who sent gunboats to fire on tankers on Saturday, who issued the retaliation statement after the Tuska seizure. These 2 Irans are genuinely in disagreement about how to handle this moment. And the reason that internal disagreement matters is that America is trying to make a deal with one Iran while the other Iran keeps firing on ships. The contradiction between Baghei's no travel and Azizi's today or tomorrow is the sound of those 2 Irans fighting the internal argument in real time. Now, let me explain what China knew before it said nothing. China has been the most important external actor in this war, not through force, not through declarations, through 3 specific things it has done quietly and consistently since day one. First, China has kept Iran economically alive. Before this war, Iran was exporting approximately 1.68 million barrels of oil per day. During the most intense weeks of the conflict, with Hormuz largely closed and American bombing at its peak, Iran exported 1.84 million barrels per day, more than before the war started. How does a country whose supreme leader was killed, whose nuclear facilities were bombed, whose air defenses were degraded, export more oil during the war than before it? China's dark fleet, tankers with spoof transponders, flags from landlocked countries, ship-to-ship transfers in Malaysian waters, yuan payments through second-tier Chinese banks outside the SWIFT network entirely. China's customs records show zero imports from Iran, but China's recorded imports of so-called Malaysian crude run to 1.3 million barrels per day, more than double Malaysia's entire national oil production. The math does not work unless the oil is coming from somewhere else. 157.7 million barrels of Iranian crude at sea right now, 97.6% heading to China. The blockade cannot reach that system. CENTCOM's own language explicitly excludes vessels heading to non-Iranian ports. Language written precisely so that Chinese tankers would not need to be stopped. Here is what that means in practice. Trump announced on Truth Social that the U.S. Navy would seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that paid a toll to Iran. China's state-owned COSCO tankers passed through Iran's toll system in the Strait. By Trump's own language, those ships should have been stopped. They were not. CENTCOM's operational language said something different. Ships transiting to non-Iranian ports would not be impeded. A COSCO tanker loading at Karg Island, Iran's main export terminal, and sailing to a Chinese refinery is technically going from an Iranian port to a non-Iranian port. Under CENTCOM's language, no interception required. The gap between what Trump said and what CENTCOM implemented is not a drafting error. It is a deliberate choice. Somebody decided that stopping a Chinese state-owned vessel in international waters is not an Iran problem. It is a China problem. And a China problem is a completely different category of geopolitical event that America is not prepared to open right now. Second, China has kept Iran diplomatically protected. When America proposed a UN resolution authorizing force to reopen Hormuz, China and Russia vetoed it. Not one country joined America's blockade. Wang Yi made 26 phone calls during the war, Iran always on the list, and the Financial Times confirmed from leaked Iranian documents that the IRGC used satellite imagery from a Chinese commercial firm called Earth Eye Co. to target American military bases. Prince Sultan Air Base, Muwafaq Salti Air Base, positions near the 5th Fleet Naval Base in Bahrain. CBS News confirmed this from 2 U.S. officials independently. China helped Iran see where America was, so Iran could hit those places more accurately. Third, and this connects directly to today, China pressed Iran to open Hormuz last Thursday. Wang Yi called Iraqi. That call produced Friday's announcement that Hormuz was fully open. Trump posted thank you in capitals, oil dropped 9%, and then America kept the blockade on Iranian ports. Iran reimposed Hormuz restrictions. IRGC gunboats fired on tankers Saturday. America seized the Tuska Sunday, and China said nothing. China pressed Iran to open Hormuz. Iran opened it. America kept the blockade. Iran closed it again. America seized a ship that originated in China, and China issued no statement. Let me use a framework I call the signal reader. In international relations, silence from a major power is never the absence of a statement. It is a statement, and the question is always who is reading that silence and what are they reading into it? Iran is reading China's silence with precision. Here is what Iran reads. China's last public act was Wang Yi calling Arakchi on Thursday to press for Hormuz navigation. Since then, America seized a Chinese origin vessel. Iran vowed retaliation. Vance flew to Pakistan. Iran announced it would not come, and China said nothing. Iran reads that sequence as structural permission, not explicit permission, the permission that comes from a partner who is still buying your oil, still blocking UN resolutions, still providing the economic oxygen you need to refuse, and who has calculated that saying nothing right now costs China less than saying something. Consider what it would mean for China to speak. If Wang Yi issues a statement about the Tuska calling on America to release an Iranian vessel that originated from China, China publicly confirms that the voyage served Chinese strategic interests. That opens the question of what the cargo was and what relationship China maintains with Iran's supply network. If Wang Yi calls Araghchi and presses Iran back to the table, China accepts accountability for whatever Iran does next, including walking away from any deal China helped broker. China does not want that accountability. China wants credit for any eventual deal without accountability for Iran's behavior in the meantime. So China calculates the cost of speaking versus not speaking and says nothing. And Iran reads that calculation precisely. Our partner has decided our refusal is acceptable. We can afford to stay home. This is not a passive silence. It is an active one. China's foreign ministry spokesman meets the press every weekday. The Tuska seizure happened Sunday. By Monday, every major outlet had confirmed the ship originated from China. If China wanted to speak, it had the mechanism and the moment. The absence of a statement is itself a deliberate act, the act of choosing silence over speech when speech would have costs. The structural reason China's silence serves China better than pressing Iran is straightforward. If Iran makes a comprehensive agreement, one that ends the war, reopens Hormuz on American terms, includes nuclear constraints, Iran becomes less dependent on Chinese buyers. A post-deal Iran with sanctions relief and access to Western markets does not need to sell crude at a discount to Chinese refineries. China loses its decade-long position as Iran's sole customer. America emerges having demonstrated its tools can produce a nuclear deal, and the energy disruption that has been benefiting China's solar, battery, and electric vehicle exports ends. Al Monitor published an analysis with a headline that captures this precisely. China plays peacemaker while letting America bleed. China calls for peace in every statement. China buys Iranian oil through every sanction. China presses Iran toward talks when that serves Chinese commercial interests, as the Hormuz opening did. And when those talks collapse, when Iran refuses to travel, when America seizes a Chinese origin ship, China says nothing because the current state of this war, extended, inconclusive, expensive for America, profitable for China, is better for China than a clean American victory on American terms. There is one more dimension. The Trump-Xi summit in Beijing is scheduled for May 14th. Trump is flying to Beijing. Trade, technology, Taiwan, all of it built around that meeting. Every decision China makes between now and May 14th is weighed against whether it makes that summit harder or easier. Issuing a formal protest about the Tuska forces Trump to respond publicly to China's interference in his own blockade enforcement. It creates a diplomatic incident before Air Force One lands. China will not do that, not for a cargo ship, for not even a cargo ship coming from China. The summit is worth more than the protests. Now, let me steelman America's position because I want you to test this, not just accept it. America's argument is that the pressure is working. The blockade turned back 25 ships. Iran's rial is down 15%. Iran's central bank warned of a 12-year recovery timeline. Iran came 80% of the way to a deal at Islamabad. The Lebanon ceasefire removed one of Iran's key preconditions. Araghchi explicitly linked Hormuz opening to Lebanon, and Lebanon got a ceasefire. And here is the important contradiction inside Iran's own government today. While the foreign ministry said no travel, Iran's Parliamentary Security Committee member Ibrahim Azizi told Al Jazeera that Iran will likely send a team today or tomorrow. Two statements from inside the Iranian government on the same day pointing in opposite directions. Iran rejected talks publicly before round 1-2, then sent a 70-member delegation to Islamabad. The public rejection may be posturing, not a final decision. The steelman goes further. Vance flying to Pakistan even after Iran's public refusal is not desperation. It is a deliberate signal to every mediating country, Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, that America is the party that showed up. And if no deal is reached, the world will have seen Iran refuse to come to the table. That diplomatic positioning matters. It gives America the narrative advantage heading into whatever comes after Wednesday, whether that is an extension, a resumption of bombing, or a third round of talks. Trump saying this morning that the concept of the deal is done may reflect genuine back-channel movement. Axios reported last week that mediators remain confident a framework is reachable. Pakistan's PM has been shuttling between Jeddah, Doha, and Antalya. Asim Munir flew to Tehran and was met on the tarmac with a warm hug from Arakchi. That warmth is not theater. It is the signal of a relationship being maintained precisely because both sides want the channel open. And Iraqi calling the seizure proof of America's lack of seriousness, that specific phrasing, seriousness in diplomacy, not seriousness in war, is the language of a negotiator who is still positioning for a deal, not of a government that has walked away. That steelman is coherent. The pressure is real. The contradictions in Iran's own government are real. A deal before Wednesday, while unlikely, is not structurally impossible. But here is what the steelman cannot answer. Every round of pressure has produced movement up to a point and then stalled because the point at which Iran cannot absorb more pressure is further out than America's tools can reach. As long as China is buying 157.7 million barrels of Iranian crude through a system specifically designed to be unreachable by American blockades and sanctions, Iran has economic oxygen, not comfort, oxygen, enough to refuse, enough to call the talks a media game, enough to fire gunboats at a tanker on Saturday and seize the moral high ground on Sunday when America responds by taking an Iranian ship. America's pressure strategy is trying to squeeze a country that has a lifeline America cannot cut. And the country holding that lifeline today said nothing about the ship it was sending when America cut it. Let me close with 3 specific signals before Wednesday, because the sequence in the next 48 hours will tell you more than any press briefing. The first signal is whether China says anything specific about the Tuska, not general calls for peace, not the blockade is dangerous language China has been using for days. Something specific about a vessel that originated in China being seized by an American destroyer. If China stays silent on the Tuska, that is China deciding the ambiguity serves it better than the protest. If China speaks, it tells you the seizure of a Chinese origin vessel crossed a threshold even the current calculation cannot absorb quietly. China's foreign ministry holds a press briefing every day. Watch what the spokesperson says when asked about the Tuska specifically, not what they volunteer, what they say when asked directly. That answer, or the absence of one, is itself a signal about where China's calculus currently sits. The second signal is whether Wang Yi calls Arakchi again before Wednesday. His last call was Thursday. He pressed Iran to open Hormuz. Iran opened it, then closed it again within 36 hours. Wang Yi making another call before Wednesday would signal that China has decided a deal now serves it better than continued limbo. It would mean China has concluded that the ceasefire expiring and bombing resuming creates disruptions in oil markets and global supply chains in the summit atmosphere heading toward May 14th that cost China more than the strategic benefits of the current extended stalemate. If China stays silent through Wednesday without a Wang Yi call, that is China deciding the current state is preferable to the outcome of a deal on America's current terms. The third signal is what Iran's actual delegation does, not what its foreign ministry says. Bagheri said no travel. Azizi said today or tomorrow. That contradiction is not noise. It is information about which faction inside Iran is winning the internal argument right now. Iran has 2 governments in this negotiation. The diplomatic government, Arakchi, who flew to Islamabad for 21 hours, who called Hormuz open on Friday, who is still in back-channel contact with Pakistani mediators, and the IRGC government, the hardliners who overruled Arakchi within hours of his Hormuz announcement, who fired on tankers on Saturday, whose public statements frame any concession as surrender. The contradiction between Bagheri and Azizi is the sound of those 2 governments disagreeing about whether to go to Pakistan. If An Iranian team arrives in Islamabad despite the official statement. The diplomatic government won that argument, and the back channel with Pakistan is producing results the press briefings cannot capture. If no delegation arrives by Tuesday, the hardliners won. The ceasefire expires Wednesday with no deal in sight, and Trump faces the choice he has been deferring for 52 days. Push back on this if you see it differently. Read the foreign policy piece describing China's reaction to the blockade as muted. Read Al Monitor on China playing peacemaker while letting America bleed. Read the Financial Times report on Earth, ICO, and IRGC satellite targeting. Read Golubov's exact words about trust being the gap, not capability, trust. And then ask the question that no press briefing is asking. China's last move was pressing Iran to open Hormuz on Thursday. Since then, America seized a Chinese origin ship. Iran vowed retaliation. The ceasefire is 2 days from expiring, and China said nothing. If Iran is reading that silence, and Iran is, then China's nothing is doing more work in this negotiation than anything Washington or Tehran has said out loud today.